Sirens, Slammers, and Service, a podcast for female first responders by female first responders. My name is Nikki Clucci, and I will be your host. As a former correctional officer in Alberta for almost 2 decades and the founder of Blue Line Fitness Testing, which provides law enforcement fitness testing and first responder wellness workshops, I started this podcast as a way for female first responders to share the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of their daily work. I want to showcase the unique perspectives, skill sets, and personalities that women bring to a first responder career and share their stories. So get ready to laugh your ass off, learn a whole bunch, and be inspired by some pretty badass women. Let's go. Hey guys, we are back today. Season 7. Can you freaking believe it, guys? It's amazing. Season 7, and I have some amazing guests lined up for season 7. Starting off with our very own Dawn Blake, who is the Inspector of Operations with the Tsuut'ina Nation Police. She's been with them for 14 years and was previously with the RCMP for 12 years. Her first posting was in Tidsdale, Saskatchewan, good old prairie land. And she came from the Six Nations Reserve by Brantford, Ontario, which is where our very own Wayne Gretzky comes from. So welcome, Dawn. How are you today?
Thank you. Good. How are you?
I'm good. I will tell our listeners, I definitely just totally creeped you on LinkedIn, saw some really rad stuff that you were doing on LinkedIn. So guys, if you want to go follow somebody rad, go follow Dawn. And then reached out totally cold and was like, hi, I'm this creepy person that wants you on my podcast. And bless your heart, you were like, okay, sounds good. Let's do it. And here we are today. So thank you for taking a leap of faith and jumping on the podcast with me.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
It's awesome. I'm so excited to chat with you. I love your vibe already. We were kind of chatting offline, and I think you got some really good stories and some really good stuff. So let's jump into it. You're been obviously in law enforcement for quite a lot of time. Don't look at it all for our listeners who can't see it, the video. I mean, this woman looks like she's like 25. I'm not gonna lie. So bless your heart. Thank you. Policing has not been hard on you. You gorgeous thing, you. But yeah, tell me about this. You started with the RCMP and then moved over to Tsuut'ina, and you're in a high leadership role, Inspector of Operations. And just again, creeping kind of through your LinkedIn, saw your kind of rise up through the ranks, and you are also Indigenous. So we add another layer, another element onto that role in law enforcement, and then also that role as a female. So how did this come to be? Like, what was your journey into your law enforcement career?
Well, we all have to think about, I bring it back to our moments of impact in our life, and the things and the trajectory kind of pushes us the way I think that we feel like we need to go. And for me, it started at a pretty young age. When I was a kid, I was a victim of crime at a very young age. And I dealt with the OPP because I grew up in Ontario, and the Six Nations Child and Family Services, who supported me through the court process, and my sister as well, one of my sisters. And when we went through that, I remember this big old burly man who was a OPP officer, and so Clay Lawrence was his name, and he was just this big burly police officer. And I remember being intimidated by him at first, but he was so kind, and the way he treated my mom and the way he treated us and how he supported us through court and through the steps and stages. And she was a single mom, right? And we were very poor, and divorced. So like, I just remember him being super kind, and he was just a great person through a difficult time. So we went through the whole court process, and then, as I got older and the court process was over, and, acting out as a kid and as a teenager, getting in trouble, hanging out with friends, getting in a lot of trouble. I kind of knew after a while into my early 20s that if I didn't change the course of my life, that I was likely going to die. It wasn't doing so hot with, thinking about, just thinking and struggling with different things, like not just thoughts of displacement, or just feeling like you just kind of lost at that stage in your life. So anyways, I ended up making applications. I dropped out of school, actually got expelled out of school at grade 9 for fighting, because that was the only way I knew how to express myself. So, and then kind of went on my own course and path from grade 9 until 18, started working in bars as a waitress and stuff. And then I ended up kind of back to what I said, knew that if I didn't change my lifestyle, that I was going to either die or end up in a really bad position. So what I ended up doing was that I applied as a mature student to Mohawk College in Hamilton, Ontario. And then I also applied. So anyways, I went through school through post-secondary, took the law and security program there. And so graduated from that. And at that time, I applied to the RCMP and the US Army at the same time. I just knew I wanted to get off my reserve. I didn't know where I wanted to go. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to go because I wasn't in a good space. So I wrote the aptitude test for the US Army and then also started the process with the RCMP and started on as a summer student. And the funny thing is out of Hamilton, Ontario, I remember this guy that took me under his wing, Ralph Edwards. He ended up saying, why do you think you scored? Like, why did you apply to the US Army? And I said, well, I just wanted to get off my reserve. He says, well, you scored really high in the aptitude test. Why is that? And I said, well, because I don't know, my dad grew up, like he's a mechanic and he used to work on cars. So I worked on cars with him all the time. And then he divulged something else to me a little while later that said, actually, did you know that your dad owned a chop shop and, you working on cars was actually illegal? I was like, but it's so funny as a kid, you don't know that, right? Yeah. You just know that you just know the skill sets you're developing, right? You don't really see the full picture till you're older. So it's kind of fun. Like looking back, I was like, oh, I didn't know that. So it just made me look at life a little bit differently. So I ended up getting accepted by the RCMP. I graduated, went to Regina, Saskatchewan, graduated, and then I took my graduation photo. I called up the OPP in Ontario and asked for Clay Lawrence, and they said, oh, he's retired. I told them why I was trying to reach out to him, and then they gave me his mailing address. So I mailed him my graduation photo and said, thank you.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So it was a big moment of impact for me. He was a big moment of impact.
Did he reply back?
He did, yeah.
Oh my God.
He said, I think of, you kids and your mom often I always wonder what happened to you guys and how you're doing. And he was really nice and really receptive. And then so I was in Tisdale, Saskatchewan at the time. That was the posting that I was at. And then it's interesting because when I told my family, especially my grandma from Six Nations, when I told her that I was joining the RCMP, she said, if you don't ever speak to us again. And now, keeping in mind, I didn't understand the dynamics and history between First Nations and the RCMP. I just know what I saw on the back of the $50 bill. It was the musical ride. I wanted to be part of something big and special. And if I wanted to be part of something, I wanted to be part of the best. So, and having dual citizenship, that's why I applied to the US Army as well. I just knew I wanted to go. So I didn't quite understand that message from her. The message was similar from my dad as well. And so it's interesting. So what I'm segueing to is that when I went to Tisdale, Saskatchewan, I was policing the Tsuut'ina Nation. And I kind of went there with a bit of an attitude and air about me that was like, I'm this educated Indian that's going to tell you, if you just understood the process more about courts and you understood the judicial system, then you wouldn't have these problems. Like I really went in there with this policing mentality. And what I found about the entire thing when I was there, Nikki, was that I knew a lot about the RCMP history, but I knew nothing about my Indigenous history with the RCMP or with Canada. And it was interesting. And it wasn't until a day that an agent from Ottawa came out and the officer said to me, well, today's treaty day on Tsuut'ina Nation. So put your red surge on, go out and, you have to give every man, woman, and child $5 and meet with the Ottawa representative and be there with him and check off the list, blah, blah, blah. So I do that. And I start seeing all these men, women, and children coming in. And I'm like, it starts to make me sick to my stomach that they're coming in for $5. It just seems so demeaning, demoralizing. And so I said to the guy that was with me, the Ottawa representative, I said, what is this about? And he said, well, it's treaty days. And we don't have that the same back in Six Nations. It's different. We call it bread and cheese day, where the community comes together. We bring lots of bags and then bread and cheese is passed out until it's gone. So treaty days was new to me. So when I said, can I see the treaty? So when I read the treaty, it said that every family gets a cow and $5 for every man, woman, and child. And I said to the Ottawa representative, where's the cows? And being 22, 23, he said, "You're cute." So I was like, oh, okay. So that was kind of the start of my path where I realized that there was a part of history I really didn't understand or comprehend. And I remember getting home that night and calling my dad and saying, "This is what happened." And he said, "The further west you go, you're going to find it gets worse." So that was a bit of an eye opener for me too. So the more I realized that I didn't know, I don't think I made a good impression in my time, sadly, in that community. Like I think I tried to do good things, but I didn't have the knowledge. So I continued my journey through the RCMP to different postings, Kananaskis, and then Cochrane, and then Calgary recruiting with the RCMP. And then I came out to Tsuut'ina Nation to recruit the youth out here. And I went home that night to my husband and I said, "Oh my God, I'm quitting the RCMP and I'm joining Tsuut'ina Police Service." And I'm at this midway point in my career of 12 years. And he's like, "That's half your pension." But he goes, "I support whatever you do, whatever you want to do." So I told my colleagues in the RCMP, they said, "You're stupid. Do you know how many First Nations police services fold and blah, blah, blah." And I was like, you know what? It's a calling. I got to do it. So I resigned from the RCMP. I joined Tsuut'ina Police Service 14 years ago. And really the community recruited me as far as, just the spirit here and the kids. And it was really beautiful. It was really nice. And so I did a lot of community stuff for the first, I'd say 7 years that I was here, and then started to go through the ranks that way, corporal, and get a little bit more exposure into other areas. And yeah, I'll take a breather in case you have any questions before I go on.
I'm in awe of you. Like I knew your vibe was amazing just as we started talking, but I'm just in awe of you. The bravery it must have taken to, in your early, like early 20s at 20 or 18, to go, yeah, I actually need to change my life. And so I'm just going to enroll as a mature student after having not been able to do any high school. And so not having that knowledge and skill set, and then to go and be like, criminal justice, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it at this college. And to just jump in like that. And then at the end of it to go, well, to navigate being in college while I'm assuming probably trying to work and trying to, support yourself, like that alone is so tough. It's so much work. And then to go, yeah, you know what? I think I'm going to apply to the RCMP, and I think I'm going to also apply to the U.S. Army. Like, I think that's super cool. Very neat about that dual citizenship. And then the bravery, like and I don't like, for your family to say, like, we will not speak to you if you do that. And for you to still choose to do it anyways, to me, that just speaks volumes, to be like, no, you know what? Like, this is something I'm going to do. And it may have been a little bit of, being naive and being young. And I think that all of us that have been in, our careers for 20-ish years started it the same way, right? I started in corrections, very naive, very much, like you said, not really knowing, one of the interview questions when I applied for corrections, what do you know about Indigenous, inmates? And I was like, I'd had my degree in criminology. I was like, oh, I know that we do smudges, and I know we do sweat lodges. And, I know that there's certain, like, sage and sweetgrass are very important. And, here I am thinking I'm very worldly. I know very much about and I knew shit. I knew what I had been told. And like I said, as you're growing up, the things that we're learning now, the things that are coming out, at part of Truth and Reconciliation, and hearing like actually what treaties were and what, and so just, I mean, like, we can forgive ourselves for that. I believe we can forgive ourselves for, being young and naive, but the fact that you still did it and your family was like absolutely hardcore no, and you still did it. I'm in awe of you. I think it's just absolutely amazing. And then again, to have the bravery at 12 years in to be like, you know what, I'm called to this. And so, like, buy pension, buy thing, I'm going to jump into this, like, wholeheartedly, 2 feet into this, Tsuut'ina Nation, and see where it takes you. And here you are 14 years later as the inspector of operations. Like, I'm in awe. It's amazing. It's just absolutely unbelievable. Is your relationship with your family better now? Like, did it evolve as they kind of saw you like sticking to this path?
Yeah, it did. Like, I still went home. I tried to go home every year. And obviously, every time there was a death in our family or community, well, in my family, I would go home. And remember when I first had my son, because his dad is non-native. And I remember taking him home to my grandma. And I remember showing him to her. And I remember her saying, "Is he white?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And she said, "Then I don't want to hold him." And it felt like that there was always going to be a barrier because my mom is non-native. My dad is native. But my dad went to residential schools for quite a period of time. And I went to day school when I was on the reserve as well. And it's funny because one of my uncles reached out to me about probably 3 years ago, and he said, "Did you make application for the day school, for your attendance at day school?" And I said, "I didn't go to day school." And he goes, "Yeah, you did. You went to number 5 school." And I said, on Six Nations. And I said, "Oh, I thought that was just a normal school." It's so funny because they had Indigenous teachers and I was surrounded by Indigenous kids. So it's so funny that even though you grew up in it, you didn't know how to define it. And then when I remember calling my mom about the residential schools and saying, "Mom, how did you not know that Dad went to residential schools?" And she said, "Well, it just nobody talked about it, Dawn. Nobody ever said anything. You just got it." She said, "We just shared the Indian bus going to Hagersville with the Indian kids. That's what we did." And that's exactly what she said. And I was like, "But how did you not know?" But she did know, but she didn't know how to articulate it or what the root cause was. She just knew she was in a very abusive, violent, horrible relationship. And it continued that way when the time that she was with him. And we dealt with the remnants of all of that. And I come from a family, I've got 4 siblings, 4 sisters, and 3 brothers. And it's interesting because all the remnants of that history, like we are that powerhouse to say that stops here. That's not carrying on to our kids. That's not carrying on. We don't talk about it, but we don't need to talk about it. You know what I mean? In the sense that we made a good life for ourselves, and saying, "You know what, this is not what I want." And we've all moved on and progressed to greater things. But like you said, we can't, recognizing our past is important to do. Acknowledging it is important to do. But using it as a reason why we don't advance is just an excuse, right? In my opinion, I'm not speaking for anybody else. I'm not saying, that people aren't damaged as a result. I'm sure there's some damage, but I guess I kind of have this mantra is that it's you against you every day, and it always has been. And you have choices every single day to go, is this what defines me today? So, it's interesting when you come into when you start to, I think, realize that your network is unstable. It's really important to go inward. And I think a lot of us do that. And I think that I didn't accomplish great things. I just went inward and went, okay, what do I need to do for me to advance at a younger age? We all hear about kids having to deal with adult problems at a young age. But we all eventually at some point in our life get the shit. At some age, at some stage, we get it and we figure it out. So I don't necessarily think I'm unique, or I just think that I've believed in me.
That's yeah. And I love that too. Like you said, it's you against you every day. And that really is like, at the end of the day, that's what you have to do, is you have to figure out what you need and what's going to be best for you. And will that make certain people angry? Yeah. Will certain people doubt your choices and mock you and look at you and think like, yeah, okay, you're not going to make it, or good luck? I mean, that happens all the time. There's haters everywhere. And if we stick on what haters say, and we allow that self-doubt to creep in, or not self-doubt because it's not us doubting, it's other people. But if we allow that doubt to creep in, that's what stops us from moving forward. I think that's absolutely true. Yeah. So when you were growing up, like you're just saying, like I didn't really know about this, and because you're growing up into it too. So that's a big part of it. It just is normal for you in your normal surroundings. Was like your culture like taught to you? Was your language taught to you? Was that stuff that was shared with you, but it just wasn't the political side of things, like the treaty and like that, why the relationship between, our Indigenous people and our policing is so strained? Like was there still culture shared with you, just not certain parts?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey guys, wanted to pop on here before we got into this next episode and let you know about a couple new rad ideas that we have for the podcast. So, the first one is we have a survey up, and I would love to know what you guys think about the show. I'd love your feedback. I'd love your ideas for the next season. And I just love to know what you like and what you dislike about the podcast. And I'm going to sweeten the deal with a $50 gift card randomly drawn from everybody that completes the survey. The survey is going to be in the show notes of all of our shows. So no matter what time you start listening to the podcast at, you'll get a chance to win that gift certificate. The second thing that we're bringing in now is the ability for you guys to leave us a voicemail. You guys can actually call into the show, leave us a voicemail, let us know what you think about the show. If you have a funny story you'd like to share from your time as a first responder, I would love those and showcase those on the show as well. So make sure you guys check out that voicemail feature. It's going to be in the show notes, and check out the survey. Make sure that you get that chance to win that gift certificate.
Oh yeah, there was definitely culture shared, and like Six Nations, the Haudenosaunee are very proud Iroquois, and they're very progressive in their thinking and very engaging, very amazing with community, amazing with their kids, and keeping them engaged in lacrosse and sport. So there's a lot of history there. The thing is there's also what's called longhouse tradition, which is my dad, who chose, when he passed away, chose not to expose us to longhouse very much or much about it at all, and refused to speak the language. I don't know if it just because of residential schools he was told not to, or to lose his language, but I know that there was a lot that he wasn't proud of. And I remember growing up being, the term half breed, nobody likes it, but I was it. And it was my name for a very long time. So I feel like I can use it. Is that it was my identity where I had to walk in both worlds. So when I went with my mom in a white world, I had to try to blend in and not look native, because it was very prominent then that it wasn't accepted. I remember my kindergarten school teacher in Hamilton, Ontario, when I was living with my mom, well, we'd come into school, and I've kind of always had a happy disposition, but I remember when we'd come in, she would sing one about me and my brother and my sister and other kids, 1 little, 2 little, 3 little Indians, 4 little, 5 little, 6 little Indians. Like, she would sing that song. And I remember I would like sing along. And I liked it. And it's funny because, so you walk a fine line in both worlds. So then when I go back to live on the reserve, different stages throughout my life, it's funny because then people would say, they know my family, so they know, and I grew up there, so they would know who I was. But if I met somebody, then they would say, "Oh, you're Native." So it's funny because it's like society wants you to spend a period of your time transitioning to the norm, and that norm being, what's least popular. Like, you drive away from that. So growing up, there was times that I wasn't proud to identify as Indigenous. And there was times that I got things because I didn't identify as Indigenous. But then there's times that when I did identify as Indigenous, then it was favorable. And so it was really a fine line to walk it all the time. And I remember my son coming up to me. He was trying out for acting in Vancouver. He moved away to Vancouver at 18 to try his acting career. And he said, "Mom, they asked me to identify as my race. How should I identify?" And I said, "How do you want to identify?" And he said, "Well, I'm Indigenous." And I said, "Then identify as Indigenous. And he said, "But what if I don't look Indigenous enough?" And that really sat with me. And I thought, what the hell does that mean? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought about it, and I thought, I know exactly what that means. You're having to walk both worlds again. And I've been there, and a lot of people are there. It's that you have this Hollywood stereotypical perception of what a First Nations person should look like. And they get typecasted into certain roles based on their certain looks. But then you look at it and you go, but you just spent the last 100 years trying to tell us to not look so Native.
Mm-hmm.
So we would be accepted into society. And now that, you know what I mean? It's such an interesting time to be in.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very careful to never assume that somebody chooses to identify with a certain race or a certain. I'm very careful because I don't tell people right out the hop. I don't introduce myself and say anything other than the fact of my name and my title and where I work. And, if deeper conversations are engaged, then we get to that. But the assumptions, they're really, they can be a little deflating, I think,
Yeah,
for a lot of people.
yeah, absolutely. I have a couple of friends, same thing, grew up with a parent that was either white or Indigenous, and they've said a lot of the same things. Like you walk that line, and every room you walk into, you kind of have to like stop at the door and look around and be like, okay, what is the least offensive, like, side of me that I'm going to put forward in this room to be not necessarily accepted, but just to so that it's an easier walk through the room, right? So that you're not being peppered with questions or you're not being right. And I thought to myself, to be uncomfortable in that every single social situation that you go into would be exhausting. Like to me, that would just be exhausting. It's exhausting enough to walk into a social situation and be like, okay, who do I have to avoid in this situation? Who do I, right? Like, who's going to want to talk my ear off? Who's the crazy ones that are going to come and talk, right? Like, I can't even imagine, like, oh, and then let's pick which side of me we're going to show. Like, it's just crazy to me. But coming now out to Tsuut'ina. So Haudenosaunee, did I say it correctly? Okay, yeah, Haudenosaunee. So obviously different traditions, different customs, different, like you're saying, longhouse traditions, things like that. Now with Tsuut'ina, which I believe, and again, please educate me, is Cree Plains based kind of Indigenous people with their traditions and their cultures. How have you found that kind of like meld or that coordination or that like learning of about the different things?
Well, the Tsuut'ina people being Dene, they are like, I find that they have a beautiful history, they have a beautiful story. They were almost completely wiped out as a nation, and they've really cultivated their life in such ways, and they're really brilliant community, brilliant people, and very entrepreneurial, very forward thinking, very advanced. And it's empowering to be in this community, because for me, it's a home away from home. So I couldn't move back to Ontario because I'd separated with my ex and had 2 children, so couldn't leave the province. So I ended up having to face, going, well, I could have left the province, but for compatibility and, ease, I stayed. I thought, when I came out here originally, I was like, this is a home away from home. It's very similar to how Six Nations was when I was growing up, in the sense of progressive and invested in their youth and invested in progression. And so a lot of similarities were there. So it's quite beautiful. And they really like to share their culture with community as well. And they welcome outsiders to come in and learn about them. They have a huge business development. I'm not sure if you're up to date on their progression with their new development areas, but they're really growing and just really just flourishing. And it's quite empowering to see another Indigenous community stand up and say, we got this, and they really want to be able to, a sovereign nation, they have their own traditions, laws, and ways before anybody else came along. Everybody did. And, in First Nations, and, it's nice to see them fighting to get back to their roots, fighting to get back to their traditions and the great law, and getting back to their own way of policing their community.
I love that. I think, like you said, that stand up and like, we've got this. We will take care of ourselves. We will take care of our people. We will take care of our community. I think that's amazing too, because the other side of, like you're saying, of walking those two lines is, okay, well, take care of yourselves, but you have to do it this way, and you have to do it the way that the government tells you, and you have to do it within these parameters that the government has set. Well, then you're not really giving the community the liberty and the freedom that they need to govern and to take care of their people the way they need to. If you're then going, oh no, actually, but you have to do it this way, and it has to follow this, like that, again, we're walking up that balance between two different, like legislations or policies or things like that. So I love hearing that. And again, progression, right? Because if we do it the same way we've always done it, it's going to remain the same way, right? We're not going to get that change. We're not going to get that, that movement forward into new opportunities and new adventures and new things like that. So I love hearing that. And so working your way up through the ranks there. So you started just as a patrol constable. Would that have been kind of like your role?
Yeah. I came over as a patrol constable, and it was interesting because so I was with my husband before he came out here, and we were in the RCMP together, excuse me, and it was interesting because then he had retired from the RCMP after 25 years, and I had been here already for 2. And I remember him saying, "Would you mind if I apply to Tsuut'ina Police Service?" And I was like, "Why would you want to do that? Like, there's only like 8 of us here, and we live in we're like, our office is an old daycare. Like, and here he's somebody that's, you know, in in a position, in a high-ranking position in national security, and he's one of the team leaders of the emergency response team." And I'm thinking, there's only 2,500 people in this community. Like, why would you want to come here? And he goes, "Well, I just feel like my policing career isn't done yet." And I said, "Yeah, sure, I don't mind." And I knew if he came here that great people would follow him. I knew it. And it's sure as shit they did. And you know what? It was absolutely beautiful because a short time later, the chief of police position became available. And he said, "Would you mind if I apply as the chief of police?" And I said, "No." And I thought, you know what? Like, he's such a stand up, he's such a wonderful person. I was like, absolutely, you should do that. And, he's quite modest. So he wasn't sure if he was going to get it. And so anyways, he ended up getting the position. He's been here now, I believe, for 11 years as the police chief. And it was interesting because we were at this event, and he stood up and he said, he said, "I will always be my wife's biggest impediment in her career." And I was like, wow. And what he meant by that is, and he said, "You're going to have to work twice as hard, and you've always had to do twice as much to prove who it is that you are and what it is that you do, because I will forever be your biggest impediment." And I was like, oh, like what a nice thing to validate, right? And
Yes.
acknowledge. I was like, what a sweet man. So
yeah, that's amazing. And the fact that he publicly acknowledged it, because you can have those conversations at home and in private, right? You can have those conversations, but for him to publicly acknowledge that, that's amazing. That is amazing. And now you guys get to work together all the time, which is also exciting.
So back to your question about the rank I think that everybody expects that if you're going to go through any kind of rank structure, that you have to have promotional examples to support that in every single stage and in every single way. And they have to really stand out, not just as being, "I showed up," right? You have to stand out. It has to be demonstrated. And I think that for me, I wasn't working towards that, but I used examples from what I did in the community and what I saw as being what we could do different, because I was given the leeway to say, do it different. When you look at truth and reconciliation, and you look at the calls for justice and the calls to action, and the list is there, and all anybody has to do is grab a hold of that goddamn list and look at it and go, how can I make a difference today in my service? How do I change the policy to open up our thinking a little bit? And just because it's always been done that way doesn't mean it should still be done that way. And all we had to do is he gave me the reins, and so did the executive, to say, try it. And that's all I needed. And I think that that's what leaders need to say to the people that are new into policing or coming into policing or wanting to climb through the ranks is, try it. We don't know that it's not going to work. We don't know that we're doing it right, but don't be afraid to try it. And so my examples were community examples to say, anything I've done in this community, I've collaborated with community members to say, we need to change the look of our police cars. How do we do that? And then I got together with a community artist to do that. And she did it, not me. And then it was just giving them the platform to say, let's do this. And then 2 community artists, I reached out to them in the community to say, come in and paint our cells. Come in and paint our cell block and show us, let's give, when a lot of our clients wake up disoriented, not knowing where they are, mental health issues, suicidal, whatever their current state might be at, I would hate to wake up in a white room, completely white room, steel white room. First of all, that would be a concern if I did. But I would hate to wake up in an all white room and not know where the hell I am, right? And it just gave some comfort back. It gave some familiarity. It gave some culture. It gave a reflection to go, okay, I'm safe. Like, so many people now suffer with so many different types of anxiety. I can't imagine. So we need to be a little bit different in our processes. If we've identified the systems aren't working, system changes are needed, then why don't we start at the roots level, which is we're a 24-hour holding facility. When we bring people in, let's let them know that they're at a First Nations police service and they're okay and they're safe. Let's give them dignity when they leave by giving them clothes or wash their clothes while they're here. So our chief of police bought a washer and dryer to say, wash their clothes, or give them new clothes and give them care packages when they leave. So it's so funny because I had a prisoner last week, and it was funny because he's like, Blake, and he's yelling out the food tray door, Blake. And I said, yeah. He goes, can I get a menu, please? I thought, maybe this is a really, really posh police service. Where did that rumor come from? So anyways, it was kind of funny because we have like some agencies may have like bare bones basic, 30-cent frozen TV dinner, and we have Hungry Man. So word gets around, I guess I should say. But anyways, my point is that the importance is I went through the rank structure utilizing community examples. So really, I think what I did, similar to what other people are doing as well, is I'm listening to what it is that they're wanting. Instead of saying we can't change and this is how the system works, and instead of feeling like, back to my Tisdale roots, is to go, I'm here to explain how the process works. I came in to this community listening to find out, what does the community want us to do? What does the community need us to do to be better? Because right now you look outside of any police service building and you're like, there's a lot of community members that are afraid of the unknown that's inside. And they think the only job we offer is a police officer position. But we have watch clerks because we can't have a dispatch system. So we needed to create administrative positions to support officers. So, in their calls for service, we have a lot of different positions here. So through summer student programs and practicum student programs, we're able to get more people the insight to start your career in First Nations policing.
I love this. Like, just like you said, just these little changes that you can make that make a massive difference, changing the look of the police cars, painting the cells, like it really is. And again, I love how you say, like, the map is there. Take that list from Truth and Reconciliation and start to work through it. What can you do on a day-to-day basis? Pick one small thing, adjust your attitude slightly. That ripple effect is going to happen. It's going to filter out. Your coworkers are going to notice that you're dealing with something differently. The members of the community are going to notice, right? And again, usually when we're dealing with the criminal element, they all know each other. It's going to get out. When I deal with this officer, this is what they said to me. Oh my God, really? Wow. Okay. Whoa, that's different. It gets out there, right? So I really love the Hungry Man example. That's hilarious. We, going back to corrections, they would come in from certain RCMP detachments, and it would depend on what restaurant they had in the small town would be the food that they would get. And so some guys would roll in with Subway, right? Because there's just the Subway is there and that's what they got to feed them. And then other guys would roll in with the flattened peanut butter and jam sandwich and the juice box. And they'd be looking over at the guys with the Subway, how come you got Subway? Oh, I got arrested in, wherever small town. Damn, I got to get arrested there. Laugh. I'm like, okay, guys. But yeah, that's funny. That's funny. And so what are you hearing from the community? What has been some of that feedback back to you guys from the community on you guys, we really need to change this? Or when this happens, can it happen like this? Has there been anything like that that's come back?
I think things like, I can't remember what year it was, but they took the school resource officers out of all the schools, I think back in 2019. I think that's when it was. And I could be wrong on that. And that ripple effect started. And First Nations community, this one in particular, really wanted that, really benefited from having that. And they really, getting back to that is really important. But we're funded differently as a First Nations police service in Canada. We're not classified even as an essential service like other police services are in Canada. First Nations policing is not an essential service, it's a program. So we're funded year to year, where other police agencies are funded for a period of time. So what we are funded for is for core function of policing. So we're not funded for specialized units. So or specialized units or specialized positions other than frontline. So when we are typically given funding to police the community based on our stats driven, but a lot of that has to do with saying, how do you do less with more? Or sorry, how do you do more with less? And how do you just, think outside the box? You rotate your officers in and out of the schools, you rotate them in and out of the high risk areas where they need to be. You have to be creative, right? So, and you have to work with what you have. And so I think that a lot of community members that have asked for a lot of things, I think there's a long list of things that they need. And I think that including them in the process and the stages has been more beneficial to show them the changes that we are making. And then I remember relationships where I'd pull somebody over in the community, and like my maiden name at the time was Johnson. And they go, "Oh, screw you, Johnson." I was like, "Oh, okay." And they weren't very nice to me for probably a period of time. And then because they've seen that consistency and that progression of trying to do better in different areas for a lot of our officers, is that they've changed the perception of our police service and a lot of us as police officers. So it's bettered relationships, because I think a lot of people are smart. They see who's here for the good. They see who comes over to retire. If they come over from somewhere else, they see who comes here and who's a bit of a blowhard. They see who comes over and doesn't know shit about First Nations policing or First Nations challenges, history or education or culture. They see the people that are invested in showing up community events. They can tell. Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest tell for community members in any community is who shows up, not only at the good times, but at the bad times. So I'd like to answer your question to say, it's this thing or this thing as an example, but I think it's all encompassing. Whereas, off duty, my husband and I will come in to go to events or a birthday party or, a feast that's being celebrated. And we don't have to because we're off or we're on holidays, but we're invested. And and I'd say the majority of our officers here are invested as well. They come in on their days off. They come in to get stuff done and follow up. And I think that compassion piece is the one that carries the distance. Not necessarily the programs or the cars or the cells, but that consistent compassion and showing up when shit gets tough.
Yes, I love that. I absolutely love that, because it's totally true. And I was going to say, with compassion, those that show up with compassion, because you can show up, you can be the person that's at everything, but are you there for the right reason? Are you there because you actually want to be there with compassion, with empathy, and with, care for the community? Or are you showing up because, it's, I'm trying to get that promotion, and if I show up, it's going to look good? Well, no, that's not the right reason. And like you said, people know, like, people can see through all of that facade and that fakeness. And if you're showing up for the right reasons and you're showing up with compassion and empathy, it goes a long ways. Same thing, going through my career, I was known as the person that was really firm but fair. Like, they would say, "Oh, Thompson's coming. God, she's such a bitch about cleanliness, but if it's clean, she'll let us have the whatever we're supposed to have," right? And or she'll, if I've done the thing she asked me to do, she will help me get the application that I need for the whatever program, or she'll talk to the nurse and figure out why the meds are wrong. Like, because it's consistently showing up, it's consistently doing what you said you were going to do, being accountable, right? And like providing the service that they need. And it's such an easy part of our job that I think a lot of officers lose. You either become, you become bitter, you become, dispassionate. You lose that, want to do it. And I'll say personally, like, I went through ebbs and flows too, where I was like, I don't give a fuck, go away. I don't want to talk to you. You're pissing me off, right? To inmates. And then the next day coming back and being like, I was in a really bad mood yesterday. Sorry. What was it that we were, what do we need to talk about? Right. So, I'm not a saint by any means, but I think it is that consistently showing up and when willing to admit when you screwed up, right? Willing to admit, like, yeah, you're right. I flew off the handle yesterday. Probably shouldn't have screamed at you like that in front of the unit, but okay, let's move on. Right. And so when you're kind of now like in the role that you're in now, Inspector of Operations, I see that you guys are hiring. Tsuut'ina's hiring everybody. So if you want to get in on this amazing agency, like they're hiring, is your role now are you similar to like a watch commander or like a shift manager, or how does that inspector of operations work?
So there's myself, and then there's a sergeant in place who's more of the watch commander, and he oversees 4 different teams of 4 people, 3 to 4, it varies. So we're 24 hours, 7 days a week policing service. We have a casino on the nation, so it's imperative that we have the appropriate policing. And so my position in operations is I'm starting to see it as all liability. So make sure they know this, make sure we know this, make sure we're doing this and training and stuff, and we're up to date on all of the policies and procedures. And so it's a different position in policing. It's more the business of policing, I find, is that it's more, the accountability. We have to, we're held to a high standard. We have to meet the same standards as the provincial standards, even though we're not classified as an essential service. But you know what? I would say that we are one of the best police services out there. Like First Nations policing across Canada, the different agencies that we've been to, they're just amazing. Like when you look at them, like there's just this, somebody's missing an opportunity to really see the great work that they're doing. And I'll say the Ganawaki peacekeepers in Quebec, we just went there. We took a team of 20 people there to see what they're doing, because they're butted right up against the city of Montreal, and they're doing amazing work. UCCM in Ontario, Treaty 3 Police Service. There's so many police agencies that are leading the way in policing their own communities, and recognizing, in regards to the position and the rank, is you have to wear multiple hats in this. So even though I might be focused on one thing today with policies and procedures, last night we were short officers, so I had to go out to a sudden death and sit there and wait for the medical examiner to show up, meet with victim services, and meet with the family. So to one degree, it's on paper, my title might be a certain thing, but in actuality is you just jump in and fill in where you're needed and when you're needed, and be flexible in that. So long-winded answer is just that we really have to be, it's a title you hold, but you have to have that mentality, is that there's no job too big and no job too small.
I think that's awesome though. And as a true leader, right? Because your frontline officers look to you and say, oh, but she was there with a sudden death. She didn't just stay in her office and didn't, respond and left us short, right? Like you came out
Absolutely.
And you did it, that's phenomenal. In season 6, we actually interviewed a good friend of mine, Dee Walker, and she had been with AHS. Yeah, you know her?
Yeah.
Oh, God, I love her. And just, started with Lakeshore Regional. And so when we'd done the podcast, when we recorded the episode, she was just right before, I think 2 or 3 days before her first shift. And I was like, okay, I'm going to call you on Wednesday and find out how your first shift went. And I, you get busy and you forget. And then she messaged me like 2 or 3 days after her first shift, and she sent me this voice message, and she's like, okay, buddy, holy shit. We jumped in both feet. And gave me this running synopsis of her first 3 days, which was basically like 5 different things that they said in training that this will never happen. But we're going to run through the scenario just so you guys know. She's like, it happened. I had to draw my gun twice. This happened. I was like, holy shit. She's like, we need to do another podcast just on my first 2 days. And I was like, I love it. But she says, you're in a smaller police force. You're going to have to wear all those hats. You're going to have to, just because this is your role today doesn't mean that it's your role tomorrow. You're going to be doing something different tomorrow. And so I think that's part of that kind of excitement, though, of working for those types of agencies is, you can get stuck in a rut sometimes if you're in a bigger metropolis, or, this is your beat and you're going to be on it for 2 years, and you're always, and yes, every day is going to be different, but really the things you do are pretty much the same every day. Whereas with you guys, it's a lot more, oh, well, now we can do this, and now we can do this, and now we can do this. So I think that's just, that's awesome. Okay, well, I don't want to take all of your time, and we've definitely been chatting, and I know that you're busy. So I'm going to jump into some fun kind of rapid fire questions just to wrap up. This one will be a little bit longer, but what is one of the things that you are the most proud of in your career?
I would say that my ability to not lose sight of why I started.
Yes. Yes. And has that been challenging? Like, has there been points where you have kind of lost your way a little bit, been able to bring it back?
I guess, just going to think about that for a second. I guess sometimes I get deflated by the negativity and the, gossip and rumor mill and stuff like that. And why I'm in my position, I'm married to the chief. I get deflated by things like that, where I start to go, okay, remember why you started and remember why you're doing this. And so there's those times, those flows of, ups and downs where you just go, you know what, just shut it out and don't lose sight of your focus and keep going and don't lose sight of your goal. Much like when you set out to, finish training, much like when you set out to get your driver's license, you're just don't lose sight of your goal, because the noise becomes loud sometimes.
Yes. Yes. I love that. And I always think too, like, hearing your story of like your husband being like, do you mind if I apply? Do you mind if I do this? Like, at the end of the day, you were there first. So they can say whatever the fuck they want. You were there first. Exactly. Doesn't matter. You were there first. So I love that. Okay. So you can take this from any point in your career, but moving through your career, what has been some of the coolest locations that you've ever had the opportunity to work in?
Well, Tisdale, Saskatchewan was my favorite, one of my favorites. It was my first posting and dear to my heart. Meeting Saskatchewan people, I was like shocked going from clubbing in Toronto to driving in 2 hours north from Saskatoon to Tisdale. So that was a beautiful community, and the people there were absolutely amazing. I love Saskatchewan people. Oh my God, so down to earth, so beautiful. And I loved that experience, and in all around, even though it was a really pinnacle point for me and learning what I didn't know about myself, it really grounded me to say, this is going to be your guiding light now. You're going to focus on this and move forward. But Tisdale and then Kananaskis was my next posting. And that was absolutely beautiful because I got to, drop from a 100-foot rope and scale into mountains and, do some search and rescue and work with some amazing people there. And it was just phenomenal, breathtakingly beautiful to be able to live in a paradise like that and do the job that I love so much to do. It was just seemed too good to be true. And still, even though we didn't have schools or community there, I was still able to work with the neighboring Morley community before I got posted there, to work there and do ski programs and stuff like that. So there was a lot of great things that came out of that too. Yeah.
That's cool. That's very cool. And search and rescue, what a cool little like extra kind of like sidebar to your career. Just pick up that skill set. Let me just rappel down here and do some search and rescue. That's pretty neat.
It's funny, one day the helicopter pilot, when they dropped us off on top of the mountain, they said, you're looking for body parts and identification. And I said, okay, well, are there any animals up here? And they said, no, they don't come up this high to this elevation. I said, okay. So then the helicopter went away and I saw this mountain goat come around the corner. And I was like, oh my God. So not everyone knows everything in their profession. Let's say that.
I love that. Literally he's flying away in the mountain. Yeah. It's like, nah, hello.
Yeah. Real Canadian comedy.
Yeah. That's awesome. Oh my gosh. Okay. What is your favorite food or snack while you were on shift?
Well, I guess I would say in Tsuut'ina, one of my partners, Willie Big Smoke, we would eat McDonald's French fries all the time. Because like you said, to your point earlier, some prisoners would come in from different areas. We would bring our prisoners into remand with McDonald's. So yeah, that would be it. That'd be it, yeah. And right now, snacks is almonds. And it's funny because my daughter, who's 21, said, you're an almond mom. I said, what is that? And so I had to Google it. And I was like, oh, I thought she meant because I eat almonds all the time. So I never really drew any attention to it. And I was like, I'm not an almond mom. But anyways, so that's my favorite snack, almonds. But
okay, but I don't know. What is an almond mom?
Tell me. Like a mom that watches what she eats. And that's what it was. It was pretty petty.
So a healthy mom is what you're saying.
That's what she's saying. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. We've now put a name on it. It's not a healthy mom, it's an almond mom. Okay, well,
Yeah.
good, great,
Yeah.
great, great, great. That's
Funny what your
hilarious.
kids teach you
Yeah.
about yourself, that you think you're one way and they let you know you're not. You know?
Oh,
Yeah.
it's funny because I was just on vacation last week with my family. We were in Saskatchewan. Again, I will reiterate the Saskatchewan people are amazing. It was a great vacation. But yeah, when you spend a straight week with your kids and they start to like they tell you about yourself very, very frankly and very they were like I was playing around with the words like skibbity and what's the other one? Skibbity toilet and bruh and like just a bunch of them
Yeah.
as we were in public and they were just like oh my God, stop it. And then I was singing a song on the radio. And I like to sing. I like to sing out loud. And they were all just like looking at me, like rolling their eyes, like, Mom, can you be quiet, please? Like, it's really like you're not a good singer. And I was just like, okay, fine then. I'm just enjoying myself up here about whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
You
totally.
know, how old are your kids?
I have an 8, one that she'll be 11 next week, and then a 15-year-old. So all 3 girls. So
Oh, right
yeah.
on. That's going to challenge you for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Oh,
It'll
buddy,
be fun.
buddy. Oh,
It'll be
Lord.
fun.
Lord.
It's fun.
I can't even. And you have 2. So you said you have a boy that's 18 and a girl that's 21?
My son is 23 now, and my daughter's 21. And and I have 3 stepkids and 3 grandchildren. Yeah, yeah,
Look at you. You're just like living that family life. That's fantastic. Oh, I love
yeah.
that. Any of your kids interested in law enforcement or no?
Well, my husband's 2 sons, so my stepsons, they're both with Calgary Police Service, and both of our daughters work here at the police service as well. My daughter's in a university program, so she's doing a communications program for the summer, and then my stepdaughter works as a youth services worker here. And it's interesting, just to change up the dynamic, my son, 23-year-old son, just went into fire. So I was like, well, what a way to throw a conversation off at the dinner table, Trey. Good job. Good job.
He's like, I'm just gonna make it difficult over here. And that's fantastic though. I mean, well, and look at this. You're raising a family of difference makers and people that are willing to step into the fray and people that are willing to, step up for their communities. So that's amazing. And I'm very happy for you guys that you were able to kind of raise that family that way. So good on you. Good on you. Okay, well, so to wrap up, any kind of last, I know, again, we didn't really get a chance to talk about, Tsuut'ina is recruiting. They are looking for applicants. Do you want to quickly kind of break down that for us, like how people can get more information or how to apply or anything like that?
Yeah, they could go to our website, the tsuut'inapolice.com website, and it's under careers there. And it gives the same outline as the same provincial guideline standards across Alberta for hiring purposes. Same process, same steps. So 18, driver's license, pass an interview, polygraph, psychological, physical. And then in addition to that, one of the number one things that we tried to do is recruit nation members. That is our priority, is to try to get Indigenous community members interested in joining Tsuut'ina Police Service. That is very difficult to do. Again, we have to be better at showing different jobs and stuff that we advertise, and it's not just policing. So yes, so we are hiring, and then Indigenous applicants, of course, are welcomed, and non-Indigenous applicants are welcomed.
That's awesome. I love that. I think like you said, it's that dynamic of trying to recruit people back, sometimes back to the community that they left for whatever reason. They don't want to come back, right? And you're trying to get them to come back, or just trying to recruit people into, a policing role that may have not had a good like interaction with police in their youth, right? And so I think that that's awesome that you guys are working really hard on that. And I loved hearing that you guys are doing so much work with the schools and with youth and things like that. I think that is a big change that policing is trying to work on for first responders across the board, really, is getting into the youth, getting into the schools, getting into sports teams, starting to explain, like, this is who we are. These are all the different opportunities that you can have. It's not just a police officer in a police car. It's not just a firefighter in a fire truck. It's not just a paramedic in an ambulance. Look at all of these different things that you can do. once you join in, or as a stepping stone into, eventually maybe moving into that role. So I think that's fantastic, especially that you've teamed up for summer students and things. Like, what a great job for somebody that's, looking for that steady work out of university for 4 months to get work experience, to get, that summer student kind of experience, and to be exposed to the different parts of it. So good on you guys. That's fantastic. Okay. Yeah. Well, like I said, I mean, I've learned so much from you. And I'm like, again, very honored to have had you on the podcast and had the opportunity to talk to you and hear your story and hear what you're sharing. And thank you for that. Thank you for taking that time as well. I think I want to have you back on again. I'll have to wait a little bit, let you get more settled into your role. Because I didn't even realize this. You've only been the inspector for a month. Is that right?
Yeah, I was in the Sergeant of Operations a few years ago, but they seconded me out to go into a different unit to learn a different aspect of policing as well, like the grants. So I mentioned earlier, we have to write grants to supplement our funding in different areas. So I went over to do that for a bit. So I'm not foreign to the front line, but it was coming back into this position. It's been an eye opener, and I'm learning a lot again. So it's like there's so many days that you have this imposter syndrome where you're like, oh my God, 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 and you have great role models. Like I used to be part of the Alberta Women in Policing, and I'm still part of them. Yeah. It's just I'm not as active, but Marcy Gonder, I just want to make mention of her as like a total boss babe, as empowering women in law enforcement across the province. Is just when she came over here, and she was the one when every time I had to step out of my comfort zone, she was like, you got this. And now she's like the acting chief of, the city of Calgary Transit. And I'm like, she's a boss babe, she just, it's nice to connect with other women that are trying to empower other women to say, keep going. You don't know what it means. You don't know who's having a shit day. So don't forget to say it, right? Like it goes the distance. And days, like you said, I've been in this position for 1 month. So on days that I'm like, oh my God, I might reach out to her to say, hey, want to do coffee? Just to get that word to say, those 2 words to say, keep going, and that's, it's, so I really appreciate you reaching out. I really appreciate you inviting me. And more so, I really appreciate the fact that you're trying to identify women and others that are trying to, make a difference and keep going.
Love it. Love it. Like I said, and now I'm like, oh, Marcy, follow up. I just wrote a note, get her on the podcast. Yeah, I love that. And yes, I'm really happy you gave a shout out to the Alberta Women in Policing. A lot of great members, a lot of good friends that are as a part of that as well. And they do amazing work, just even connecting women together, like you said, to create that network of, hey, you're having a shit day and you don't know what to do, or you don't know how to do this certain part of your role. Reach out to somebody on AWIPS and they will be able to help you. Like it's a great organization. If you're a listener and you're part of law enforcement or you're part of, public security, by all means, reach out to AWIPS. They have they've got actually a conference coming up in October in Medicine Hat. They've got their Women's Award of Excellence. I'm probably saying it wrong. I have the poster up at Blue Line, but they're taking voting right now, I think until August 31st. So if you know a woman that you want to nominate them. Let's get those names in for sure, because I think that, again, the more recognition that we can give to women for the work that we're doing on a day-to-day basis, that we may not, like you said, and before we started recording, you might not even know that you've made that impact, but sometimes when you hear that you've made that impact, it gives you that little boost to just keep going and to be like, yep, I got this. I can do it. I made a difference here. So I'm going to keep doing this. So yeah, absolutely. I love that. Well, Dawn, like I said, it's been a treat today. I feel so honored to have had this time with you. And I really, thank you. Thank you for that. I will throw the information for Tsuut'ina and recruiting and things like that. We'll throw them in the show notes. So if you are interested in applying, all that information will be in there. If you want to follow Dawn, go find her on LinkedIn. Again, posting lots of great stuff and just being a really great ambassador for your agency and for women in policing. So thank you very much for that. Anything else you want to add?
Thanks, Nikki. No, just thanks for having me. I'm excited to see who you interview next.
Me too. We'll figure it out together, I guess.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
have a
thank
great
you.
day.
You too. Thanks.
Well, that's it for today, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in, listening, giving me your time, your energy, and your attention. I completely appreciate it. Make sure you check out our next episode with another badass female first responder anywhere you get your favorite podcasts. And follow us on Instagram and Facebook at bluelinefitnesstesting.com. I hope you stay safe, keep your head on a swivel, and watch your six.